gecko hunter, you need very sharp eyes, a lot of patience, but also a lot of courage, because even in the middle of the night, they look for geckos at a graveyard. But this job is much better than they ever had before. The captured geckos are kept in a cage before they are killed one by one. Those who have laid eggs can stay alive a little longer. Their remains are put on a stick to dry. Then by thousands they are put in boxes to be shipped to Hong Kong and Taiwan. This one small operation provides an income to more than 50 people.
People in Taiwan use medicines from geckos against the cold. In the cold season, they buy a lot. They also use it against asthma and erection problems.
The demand for traditional medicine in China and Taiwan has brought some wealth to impoverished villages in East Java. But the gecko business has a downside. Because of the high demand, fewer lizards can be found in the forest. Farmers are now starting to breed geckos to stay in business. Stepvasen, AlJazeera, Probolinggo, East Java.
Watching Al Jazeera, these are the headline stories this hour. Fierce fighting between Libyan government forces and rebels is focused on the country's central coast now, with reports that government fighters have pushed rebels back from Bin Jawad. There have also been reports of airstrikes and attacks in Misurata and the oil town of Ras Lanuf. Outside of Ras Lanuf, rebels say they shot down one of Gaddafi's warplanes. The wreckage and bodies were strewn across the ground. The rebels saying they used an anti-aircraft gun to down the plane. They took a crew of journalists to see the site. And what's believed to be a troop of 7 British forces and 1 British diplomat held by rebel forces in Libya have been released. They were let go along with the diplomat in the eastern city of Benghazi, being detained in a place called Suluk while trying, they say, to make contact with opposition forces. There are protests continuing in the island kingdom of Bahrain, now for the 3rd week. A large crowd has blocked the entrance to the Prime Minister's office at Gudabia Palace. Elsewhere in the city, demonstrators are still camped out at Pearl Roundabout in the capital, Manama. And in Lebanon, thousands of people were on the march, calling for an end to the country's sectarian political system. They want a secular government in the country, they say. The Egyptian Prime Minister's office says it's appointed Nabil El Arabi to be the new foreign minister as part of a cabinet reshuffle. He's a former judge at the International Court of Justice and was a permanent representative to the United Nations. He replaces Ahmed Abul-Gheit, who was the country's foreign minister for 7 years. The Afghan President Hamid Karzai has told the US that offering apologies for civilian deaths in his country isn't enough. Hundreds of protesters took the streets of Kabul to demonstrate against US military operations. Back with the news hour in about 30 minutes' time. Now time here on Al Jazeera for tonight's Inside Story.
Thousands of Egyptian protesters stormed the headquarters of the State Security Service and demand the organization be abolished. The agency is accused of widespread human rights abuses and torturing its own citizens. So why is the security apparatus so feared and hated? And what role could it play in the new post-revolution Egypt? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Darren Jordan. 3 weeks after President Hosni Mubarak's ousting, Egyptians are turning their anger towards his internal security apparatus, storming the agency's main headquarters and seizing documents to help build a case that the service was used as a tool of torture and abuse against ordinary Egyptians. The protesters are demanding the agency be dismantled and its leaders face justice. Aman Mohyeddin has more.
Outside the gates of the sprawling state security compound in Cairo, Egyptian soldiers stand guard. This fortified complex was home to the country's most notorious security apparatus. But in the new Egypt, even its ironclad doors were not enough to keep protesters from overtaking the compound on Saturday evening. Inside, protesters found documents, police records, underground rooms, and even a passageway that led to a secret living quarter they claimed was used by the powerful Minister of Interior, now standing trial. They also found bags of shredded documents. With the recent departure of the Mubarak-appointed Prime Minister Ahmed Shafiq, protesters feared that state security officials would destroy all evidence that could implicate them.
After protesters stormed this massive state security compound behind me, Egypt's new prime minister asked anyone with incriminating evidence or documents to hand them over to the military so that they can be used in the prosecution of former regime officials.
Documents like these obtained by Isra Abdel Fattah, who was detained by state security twice for her political activism, show how state security was spying on her, even hacking into her email accounts to find out which organizations she was involved in and who she was in regular contact with.
These records show they were extremely paranoid from us. Every piece of information that for us seemed insignificant would be significant for them. They were convinced that there must have been some international organization behind my activities.
That sense of paranoia led state security to act with impunity for years, many say. State security officials were often accused of corruption, extortion, and torturing activists and citizens alike. Today, on the walls of the abandoned complex that came to symbolize the oppression Egyptians endured under the previous regime, a simple message left behind by the protesters. This is the fate of the oppressors. Ayman Muhyiddin, AlJazeera, Nasser City.
So what's the history behind Egypt's infamous state security service? Well, Egypt was the first Arab state to establish a security service in 1913 under British mandate. It still exists to this day. The Internal Security Service has been accused of some of the worst human rights abuses in order to suppress dissent against Hosni Mubarak's 30-year rule. It's rumoured the agency has some 500,000 staff and a large network of informants. The history of torture allegations against the agency has grown since the war on terror was launched after 9/11. The Egyptian government's been accused of turning the country into a torture centre for terror suspects and even acknowledged that since 2001, the US government transferred up to 70 detainees to Egypt under extraordinary rendition. Well, to discuss Egypt's state security agency are our guests. In Cairo, Hisham Safi Eldin, a former police officer. In Dubai, Theodore Karasik, a director of research at the Institute for Near East and Gulf Military Affairs. And also in Cairo, Hossam El Hamalawi, who's an Egyptian blogger and activist. Gentlemen, welcome to the programme. Hisham Safi Eldin, let me start with you, if I may. What do you know of the inner workings of the security agency, and does it deserve the allegations of torture and abuse?
Well, first I have to mention that yes, there were some torture, there are lots of abuses, and the entire sector needs to be reformed or even dissolved into a new mechanism and a new ideologies. The problem is not in the system or the state security itself, but in the whole regime, including the Ministry of Interior and the state security. State security was turned into a tool in the hand of the regime instead to be a tool in the hand of the people to protect themselves and protect their home country. So I guess, yes, it has turned to be a weapon which is pointed